the company that you've started?
I'm
Companies.
Steve Roden, been CEO of Learn Something Inc., which was a venture capital backed firm here in Tallahassee. About 18 months ago, we successfully sold it to Xerox. And since the sale, we initially integrated Learn Something into Xerox and then joined forces with an entity called TMS Health in Boca Raton. And then just a few weeks ago, we've further consolidated and we've created Xerox Pharma Services, which will be a worldwide operation aimed at pharmaceutical, consumer packaged goods, and over-the-counter medicines, and the vertical side of like retailers that are in pharmacy. And I've been made president of that division. So part of it, Tyler, is they were looking for an entrepreneur because it's a new business being started up inside of a big company. So this may be a classic case of corporate entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Yeah, at its finest right here.
Yeah.
Started as a regular entrepreneur, now you're a corporate entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And going back to when you first started learning something, what was
Yeah.
your inspiration to start this company?
Well, this company, I got involved in it because the venture capitalists that had made an initial stake in it had kind of lost their way. The management team was lost. So this was more of a turnaround than a pure startup. So in the career, I've done 2 or 3 startups, and this was my first turnaround experience. But I came in as a investor and as CEO about 10, 11 years ago into a company that was deeply in debt, performing very, very poorly, lots of execution issues, financing issues, lack of clear strategy.
Sounds like there was a lack of leadership.
A lack of leadership, and so in this one, this was more of a sense of, in the spirit of good to great, we had to get good people on the bus. So I made a lot of management changes. I brought in pretty much a whole new team to run the company, remodeled the business strategy, focused it at the pharmaceutical and pharmacy retail, and that paid dividends. The fact that we got it. Just to give you a couple of things, 3 or 4 years we were on the ENT fastest growing list of small businesses in America, and then 2012 we were picked as Florida's most innovative company, which was a pretty neat thing. So all of that set us up as a good acquisition target for a public firm, and like I say, we executed on that about 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now sounds like you're starting a whole new different part of it.
This is this is really different. It's being in a very, very large company with a big brand, lots of resources. You don't have the same autonomy you do, but you don't have the same risk profile. So as Learn Something, my money was at risk. Had venture capitalists that were participating with me at risk. Angels that I had, there were people I knew, friends, etc., at risk. Now it's more of a, it's public dollars and large-scale investors, and just a different,
So do you find it more or less stressful now that you're owned corporately?
Well, there's more stress attached to the reporting side and the frequency of it. I have to prepare weekly what I used to prepare quarterly.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's gotta be
So you've got
tedious.
it's just the constant flow of questions on how you're doing, financial metrics, performance metrics, etc. And whereas when you're running your own business, you're asking those same questions, but you're not answering to somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. You're just kind
quarterly,
of recording it for yourself.
Yeah, you're doing it for yourself, and you're discussing it internally, but you're not under the scrutiny of, But you do have to. Even as an entrepreneur, the moment you take $1 of venture capital, you sort of have a boss.
Yeah.
You've got them helping you along the way.
They're always going to be on your back.
Always on your back. Okay. How you doing? Why didn't this happen? When is that going to happen? Oh, you told us this was going to happen. Didn't happen when you told us.
There's definitely a little more freedom with that rather than
much more. Much more, because you're just accountable. for it. Whereas in this case, when you're even entrepreneuring in a corporate environment, the people you're reporting to have to report likewise every week. Mm-hmm. So they're,
so you said that you had to find venture capitalists to start your business originally, and why don't you just go through the experience of trying to find a venture capitalist that would fund your business?
Yeah, so the very first company I did was back in the early 80s, and at that stage this was all pre-internet. And so venture capital raising at that stage was, particularly when you do your first one, you don't have a lot of connections, you don't know anybody, you've got really no track record. And I started that company more of as a defensive measure. It was I got involved with a fast-growing company that ran out of cash, and I decided that I wanted better control of my own destiny, so I effectively did a startup that, and then I, tried to self-finance it for as long as I could. But then I reached a point and realized my bigger opportunity was if I could publish the intellectual property that I was dealing in, and then that.
Which was?
Yeah, at that stage, this was back in the early days when the personal computer had, I know that's hard for you to believe, but personal computers were brand new.
Oh, wow. How big were they?
Oh yeah, they were big old boxes, So these were, I'd hire salespeople because they were strong enough to carry the equipment.
Not necessarily get selling.
It was a very, very different market at that stage. But what had happened, there were these startup companies that would place some you haven't heard of, like probably WordPerfect, Lotus 123, DBase 2, and then they all got superseded later with a client of mine called Microsoft. And
never heard of that one.
Yeah, heard of that one. And they came up with the idea for Windows and Office, and I built the very first training for the Windows product and became a strategic partner with Microsoft in doing that. And then when IBM launched the PC, I was their partner building training for the then new IBM PC and software applications. And
so have you always been involved with training employees?
Some combination. So training has been one of the things I've been really interested in. The other would be what I'd consider knowledge management. So one of the successful companies we built was called ComCell. And what we did, if you think about like Expedia today, pre-internet, we were doing that on CD-ROM.
Okay.
And the target audience was travel agents. So all this sounds hard to believe now because you look at the internet, you go to Expedia, you wouldn't even think about a travel agent. But back in those days,
everything is online for you.
The business metaphor was you would pick up a phone called a travel agent, and in those days they had a giant book that sat on their desk, and they would flip through it and then tell you about a property. And so what we did was we automated that process just like in Expedia, so you could search by what city you were in, you could search by proximity to a location, you could search by, accommodation, pool, whatever the criteria was. So we built a criterion reference database and then matched it with visual images so that you could search and retrieve hotels. Now we were successful in getting that company sold to that ended up going to News Corp. So you may be familiar with Rupert Murdoch, and he was one of the multi-billionaires that owns 20th Century Fox, 20th Century Television, all of that. And so anyway, Murdoch bought that company from our partners, and we actually built that company on the Georgia Tech campus as in an incubator. So we were the first successful incubation out of the Georgia Tech incubator.
Wow.
Which was cool.
Yeah.
It was very cool. And my partner at the time in that business was the president of the Tech Alumni Association. So we had a wonderful set of connections. We could get all the best and the brightest from Georgia Tech working for us. And so that was a good run. That was but most of the companies have had either a training or knowledge orientation. And it's fun for me because a lot of my friends have built companies based on selling things, and I've always built companies based on selling ideas and knowledge.
Hey man.
Yeah.
Innovation right there.
There's innovation.
Yeah.
You've gone.
Oh, I think it's still video right now.
It just went dark, so it's no big deal.
Yeah, we're still going. Okay, and so what kind of advertising do you do now for Learn Something?
Yeah, as Learn Something today, the advertising is pretty much bucketed into digital media. We'll have postings, social media. We're trying to leverage social media. In the past, it's been more public relations, things like public speaking. Pre-internet was a different environment. You had to get out and make your company visible, and you sure couldn't afford the classic media.
Yeah, exactly. Blogging back in the day was more like just kind of saying it to people.
Yeah, there was no blogging. Yeah. The way you blogged was you would write white papers and get invited to do speeches, presentations in public forums, and we were pretty successful at that, and we were tried to be opinion leaders on topics. Just like blogging today. I mean, you can have a blog, but if you don't have something that's interesting to people, you don't have any traffic.
Yeah, and no one's going to look at it.
Yeah, same was true then. It's just that the delivery media would be maybe at trade shows and public speaking environments and things like that.
Yeah.
Today I've got people that are writing, ghostwriters writing for me, doing things. We've got a professional public relations group and an advertising group at Xerox, and you'll see our Xerox ads, and we've got a branding challenge we face in the sense that like when I sold to Xerox, all my friends, a lot of my friends sent me notes that can you come help me, my copier's down. And I was like, okay, funny. But, so,
is that the same Xerox? Xerox that has like all the stores and companies?
Yeah. So Xerox is, $26 billion company with 150,000 employees. And probably today 60% of the revenue is services.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so nobody would have guessed that. But it's the same transformation that IBM went through from being a box company to being a service company. And so more than half our revenue is now services. But we have some, probably just like IBM experience, we got some branding issues. People still automatically default to, okay, they're a copier company.
Yeah,
and exactly. Nothing could be further from the truth. We're big time service.
Do you feel like that's one of the bigger challenges of working with Xerox now, like having to deal with all the branding issues?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's one of the bigger challenges, but it's a double-edged sword because you have to do a little bit of communication with clients about the service side of your business, but it makes for a pretty interesting PowerPoint presentation. You start off, we do roughly, 13 million or 13 billion a year in services. People go,
wow. I didn't see that one coming.
yeah. So it's, and then when you realize, you start the storytelling that people like, Google and Microsoft and others use us as their back office people, and all of the Medicare claims and things like that. That's us as the back office people. Doing that. So it doesn't take long to get people to realize the scale of it, but it's just the instant branding effect of Xerox equals copier.
Yeah.
It's a transformation that's going on though, and I think you'll see more and more ads, that are oriented like to telling our complete story.
Yeah, not necessarily promoting Xerox, but promoting that it's not what everyone.
Yeah, and it is that it's a that service is a big part of what it offers. Yeah.
Okay, and my next question for you is, so compared to back when in the 80s when you first started your company to today, how much easier is it to manage things like advertising and promotion through a website?
Well, back in those days, there was no website.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it was very difficult to create a national presence. And thus, most companies that were, like what I was doing in those early days, you almost had to be great at doing trade shows, because, like, when I first got started, you're going black there. Yeah, you need to put your finger. Yeah, but when we first got started, the ideas like global distribution. How would you
like
pull
foreign
that off?
language.
Well, but suddenly I realized that, well, gosh, at these trade shows, like back then there was a show called Comdex, and I managed to get myself on the Comdex program as a spokesperson, talking about technology, innovation. There were early magazines starting up like Byte, and Byte was for technology geeks, was one of the earliest magazines. So again, we used more PR than advertising, and we would write interesting articles. They would get published. So I can remember we wrote an article in Byte in the early days and had 6,000 responses.
Wow.
But back then, responses weren't emails.
No.
These were like letters that came into it.
So yeah, wow.
Then
it
was
like, a lot harder to manage that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a much more difficult. Whereas the internet now, good or bad, you do something, everybody knows.
Yeah, exactly.
Instantly. And the internet, I think, is more challenging in the sense that just finding something that attracts people's attention is hard. The fact that you post something on the internet, if nobody's looking, it's a worthless moment for you. So I think the basics are still the same. You got to be doing something interesting, valuable, intriguing, and if you are, then you'll catch people's attention. But you spend a lot of time talking about internet strategy and then don't have, substance.
Yeah, exactly.
Then, you're really wasting your time.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's anything. If the company that you're trying to run doesn't have anything that people want, then...
That's right. See, you remember the Wendy's commercial years ago, "Where's the beef?" You got to have the beef. If there's no beef in there, nobody's going to buy your product.
No one wants to just buy a bun.
Yeah, that's right. Nobody's going to buy the bun.
Okay, so more of a management perspective.
Yeah.
When you're trying to hire new employees, how do you decide whether or not you can trust them or not?
I don't usually start off with the trust as my foremost.
Well, then what do you look for?
Yeah, I'm looking initially for skill match, where they appear to have some of from a resume, they have the background, the experience. And then after that, I'm looking for a personality that I've got confidence in. Maybe that is the trust, but I'm looking for somebody that I feel like would fit into the culture of the team, somebody that's got, motivation, that, I believe they're going to go that extra mile to, get done whatever they're being asked to do. And then somebody that's kind of, fun to be around. I don't really, especially at this age, I don't really want to spend my time with the Eeyore personality.
Exactly.
If they're not a little more fun than that, it isn't worth it.
Okay. And, so the team aspect is really important.
Team is so important because back to my good to great metaphor, you want people on the bus that are competent, skillful, got the right background, but also are enthusiastic personalities. And you don't always have harmony running a company by any stretch of the imagination, but you want people that will align around a vision, a strategy, and participate in it, and then even debate it, not be in alignment with it, argue it, but ultimately.
It's someone that can express their opinion on something. And
You want that.
Uncomfortable.
You want some of the the conflict. Because that's where good ideas come from. Yeah. But what you don't want is somebody that's that's bullheaded. That that's a waste of time, because ultimately you got to make decisions, and you want to give everybody the ability to participate with their opinions. But at some point you got to quickly move on and get on to executing a direction. And there's a personality type that you're sort of looking for that can, be part of a team. And,
yeah, exactly.
That's what we're after usually.
And what kind of training do your new employees go through?
Yeah, in this world that I'm living in now in Xerox, there's a formal training process, and it's more structured than an entrepreneurial small company. In the large corporate environment, there's an incredible amount of attention to risk management. So your people are largely going through compliance training and ensuring that they understand ethical behavior, corporate security, things like that. That you don't really put that kind of effort in an entrepreneurial small company. You're more in a small company training them into best practices. Defining how we best do things.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the small company training is more mentoring. Where you are working with them, and you've assigned them to somebody that is helping them, prepare for the job. And then your training is really, like in things like sales and that kind of thing. It's, you're doing a combination of knowledge about your products and services coupled with, how we want to engage with people. So you're doing a lot of modeling on,
okay.
Here's the style, the approach that we want you to take.
Mm-hmm. All right. Interesting. So, what kind of day-to-day things did you have to go through while starting up the company, like as the entrepreneur, owner of it? Yeah.
Well, part of what you're doing as an entrepreneur, it's the classic. You've got the customer. Mm-hmm. And you've got to be, effectively, you are the salesperson as an entrepreneur. You got to build relationships with those customers. They've got to trust you. And, the old saying about God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You need to be listening, not just talking, and understanding the needs. And all the businesses I've built, have been foundationally on the concept, what is the business problem I'm solving for these clients? How urgent is it? And am I working on finger bleeds or neck bleeds? And I prefer to be working on neck bleeds. So in other words, if it's not important, you as a customer are not ever going to get very excited about it. So that's one of the things you're doing. You've got the customer side. Then you've got your employee side. So you've got to be able to find, motivate, align. And I believe strongly in organizational alignment. And by that, people then have to understand what is it that you're asking them to do, how important is that, what is their role in that, what development they need in order to be able to do that well for you, what are the rewards and recognitions that are attached to that. So if you haven't created that organizational alignment with your people, where they all have a clear understanding how they're fit and what they're doing to help the company succeed, then you failed as the entrepreneur. And then the last bucket is your investors, and you can't ignore them. If you've got outside investors, then a good bit of your time is spent in terms of communicating to them good news, bad news. And the hardest part, you want to make sure your enthusiasm for what you're doing is not misrepresenting your business, because you can set too high an expectation, and then
everything's got to be like parallel.
Well, you can be doing great and look like a failure because you've set such a high expectation. Everybody thinks you're going to grow at 200% rate, and you're growing at 100, and they look at you like you're failing. And I said, that's
growing at 100%
rate. It's still good.
Looking pretty
good. It's a skill that you develop as an entrepreneur, that you've got to set sort of realistic expectations, not be, and then generally better off to positively surprise people rather than continuously negatively disappointing them. So setting your expectations, I'm not saying sandbagging,
set them at a reasonable level.
Set them at a reasonable level, and then get your targets at a reasonable level. And it's interesting because when you're out there kissing frogs, trying to find a prince from a financing point of view, every business plan they see is a hockey stick.
Yeah.
And if they expect that. The reality is they automatically start discounting your hockey stick and right away. So as soon as you can, getting to the point that you level set with them. Here's our realistic expectations. Here's what we're going to get done, and then here's the bumps we're going to go through, and here's when we're going to, come out of that. You're just way better off having that kind of relationship with your investors because they'll lose trust in you if you don't.
Yeah.
So I think all three of those audiences.
That's an interesting analogy made with the hockey stick.
Yeah. Well, and that's like I say, you write a business plan. Most of the venture capital community is used to seeing that and immediately discount it, and they start asking you validation questions on why you believe that's true.
Exactly.
And
And you're starting to get like privately investigated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you got to be able to back up. You got to be able to back up your story. One other area too that I think is, it'd be kind of a fourth, but it's you belong in a community, and depending on the kind of business that you're doing, you got to find the balance between how do I support my community and how do I not get sucked dry by my community, because most of the startup new businesses immediately have everybody's hands out wanting financial donations, brand building things, and some of that is valuable to you, but you got to be careful with that. So I found the balance is, give more back of your time and your personality and your community support that way, and carefully watch your investor dollars and make sure they're going to grow the business. Yeah, and then you're giving back to the community. We created 100 jobs here, and we're giving back a ton to the communay by virtue of creating
100 different families.
That's right, 100 different families that are all participating and all investing, and like I say, so there's a effort there that you got to be controlled.
All right, so kind of more of a fun question here. Do you have any horror stories? What was like the worst experience you had starting up a business?
Yeah, I've had a lot of them. I've had cases where I've had people that were dishonest, and I had to had to fire them. I've had, I could remember, and this is not a classic horror story, but I finally got invited to go present to Bloomberg.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I've got 800 analysts up there. I've got this hot company. Everybody's eager to hear my story. The guy in front of me steps on the power cord and breaks it off to the projector.
Oh my gosh! Kind of like how my camera goes out.
Like your camera go out. Yeah. But so suddenly I'm in front of the 800 analysts at Bloomberg with none of my presentation material, and and again, so the horror. Well, I had to wing it. And
did you kill it?
No, I did it, and it worked out. Actually, it probably worked out better because they all realized what had happened, and kind of seeing me under that stress and being able to
overcome the adversity.
I got the investors I was looking for.
There you go.
So it all, but you just got to be ready for any and everything. I can remember back in the technology days, one of the technology we used was a round disc called a laser disc, and probably you've never even seen one, but it was, the storage media back then was quite large, and it was virtually indestructible, quote.
Oh, wow.
Well, I took it, I was on stage in front of thousands, and I said, it's virtually indestructible. I hit it against my hand, and it breaks in half.
Virtually indestructible.
Yeah.
Barely the Hulk.
Yeah. So, these were those nightmare moments that, you at the time, you
just gotta overcome it, though.
You just keep going, and you learn to not get too high, and you learn to not get too low, no matter what happens, and just sort of, because your team's watching you.
Yeah, people got your back.
And if you're calm and confident and continue punching ahead, your team will. If you're panicked and running around like a chicken with its head cut off, you got a problem. You're not built for entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So
if you had to give one bit of advice to starting up entrepreneurs, what would it be?
Yeah, I would focus at, every time I would not focus at how cool it is, this technology, this thing you're building. I'd focus at what's the business problem it's solving, how important is that business problem to the person you're solving it for,
neck wounds,
and then is it a neck bleed, and then will they be willing to pay for it? And the sooner you can get to the answer yes or no on that, the better off. So maybe is the worst place for an entrepreneur to be, because you start convincing yourself to spend money to do research, development, building stuff, and a lot of times the building gets ahead of the market, and or you build a solution that's not right for the market. So engaging early and often with the people you're trying to sell to, understanding their business problem and building solutions that map to it. If you do that fairly consistently, you're going to be successful a whole lot more often than if you sit in a vacuum and your incredibly bright, clever team comes up with this cool idea and they take it to market, and then you realize nobody's buying it.
Exactly.
So, the voice of the customer is a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, since it's the ones that bring in the money.
That's where the money is.
All right, well, I think that's all we got, Steve. I really appreciate this, by the way.